During the sweltering months of 1988, Detroit witnessed one of its most perplexing criminal cases when a union-operated security transport carrying nearly $2 million simply evaporated from city streets. The crew was later found alive but confused, while the substantial sum had completely vanished. What followed were months of fruitless investigation. Authorities found themselves empty-handed. No solid evidence, no viable suspects, no clear answers. The case eventually grew cold and was shelved. 3 decades would pass before an unexpected discovery at a small community bookstore would breathe new life into this forgotten mystery. A volunteer sorting donated materials stumbled upon a crucial piece of evidence, an old meeting document that contained routing information for the very transport that disappeared. Most shocking was a signature from someone who, according to all official documentation, had no business being involved. The incident unfolded during Detroit's humid summer months, when a routine cash delivery operation completely disappeared, leaving investigators baffled. Unlike typical violent crimes, this case left behind no bloodshed, no signs of struggle, and no obvious explanations. The security vehicle belonged to the Municipal Transport Workers Organization and had begun its journey from the Standard Depot during pre-dawn hours. The route had received official approval 24 hours prior. Secured within reinforced metal compartments was approximately $1.9 million in currency, bound for a financial processing center located across town. The transport crew consisted of 2 experienced union members, Harold Price, whose driving record spanned more than 10 years, and Marvin Daniels, a security specialist renowned for following protocols to the letter. The departure appeared completely normal. Dispatch confirmed the vehicle's punctual departure, with no prior maintenance concerns noted in service records. Both crew members had properly signed in, cargo bay doors were sealed per standard operating procedures, and Daniels had documented the shipment details while verifying the condition of currency containers. Price had completed his pre-trip inspection of mechanical systems. No additional personnel accompanied the transport, and police escort wasn't deemed necessary. Typical protocol for moderate-value weekday operations. Before we continue, please share your location in the comments below. We appreciate our viewers and want to hear from you. Remember to subscribe for more content like this. Something went catastrophically wrong during transit. Union Communication Center attempted radio contact when the transport failed to reach its intended destination. No response came through any communication channel. Within 47 minutes of departure, the vehicle had effectively vanished from existence. Checkpoint verification attempts failed completely. No witnesses reported seeing the transport cross familiar intersections. Traffic incident reports from that time frame showed no accidents or unusual detours along the planned pathway. The vehicle never reached its destination facility and never returned to base. It had simply ceased to exist. Approximately 90 minutes after the initial disappearance, the missing transport was discovered. An unidentified caller reported an abandoned vehicle near a defunct industrial facility in Highland Park, a declining commercial district with sparse pedestrian activity. Officers responding to the scene found the vehicle sitting with open doors. The cabin remained undamaged with no visible signs of forced entry, collision damage, or emergency stopping. The rear storage area, previously containing sealed currency containers, stood completely bare. Security locks showed no evidence of tampering or forced manipulation. Both Harold Price and Marvin Daniels were discovered inside, unconscious but breathing. Daniels sat upright in the front passenger position, showing no external trauma. Price was positioned on the cargo bay floor. Medical personnel confirmed both men maintained stable life signs despite appearing disoriented and responding sluggishly to stimuli. After medical stabilization, both men described memory lapses. Price remembered detecting an acrid, unfamiliar smell before losing consciousness. Daniels recalled only parking the vehicle before experiencing vertigo and overwhelming exhaustion. Laboratory analysis of blood samples proved inconclusive, revealing no tranquilizing drugs or narcotic substances. However, both men exhibited temporary eye and respiratory irritation consistent with exposure to airborne chemical agents. Crime scene analysis recovered no fingerprints except those belonging to the transport crew. No equipment, disguises, or chemical containers were found at the location. The complete $1.9 million had vanished without leaving any trace. Investigators initially concentrated on potential internal security breaches. Knowledge of transport routes and timing had been restricted to a small group within the union's operational division. Detectives examined work schedules, communication logs, and internal telephone records while cross-referencing employee lists against financial patterns and alibi verification. Edward Holt emerged as an early person of interest, a former transport operator who had left the unit in late 1987. His resignation hadn't raised concerns initially, but investigators discovered Holt had maintained unofficial relationships with active union members and had been seen at the facility multiple times during the preceding year. Despite lacking authorized access, Holt's telephone number appeared in dispatch logs from 2 days before the incident, documenting an incoming call with unknown content and no recordings available. A warehouse employee reported observing a vehicle matching Holt's sedan parked near the Highland Park facility on the morning of the theft. Unable to provide license verification or positive driver identification, investigators still brought Holt in for questioning. He denied any criminal involvement and claimed to have spent the day performing automotive repairs at his residence. His alibi remained unsubstantiated with no corroborating witnesses. Financial record examination revealed no suspicious monetary activity, and investigators found no physical evidence connecting him to the transport, its contents, or the abandonment location. Lacking probable cause for extended detention, police released him while maintaining his status as a person of interest. The investigation stagnated due to insufficient actionable intelligence. During the following 3 months, progress remained elusive. Hundreds of potential leads underwent review, ranging from eyewitness accounts to workplace gossip. Investigators tracked equipment purchases, analyzed staffing anomalies, and conducted extensive employee interviews. No individual emerged with the combined elements of motive, opportunity, and access capability. Every currency container had disappeared along with all evidence of the transport's journey beyond the point of disappearance. The theft had produced no useful forensic evidence, no documentary trail, and no subsequent similar attempts. The operation demonstrated clean execution with precise timing. Speculation regarding outside assistance, including possible involvement of organized criminal elements, was explored but never substantiated. Eventually, investigators classified the case as inactive and transferred files to storage. Both Daniels and Price resumed restricted duties before taking early medical retirement. The case received an official designation of unresolved, ranking among the city's most professionally executed and frustrating monetary thefts. Nobody could have predicted that decades later, across town in an unrelated location, donated reading materials would resurrect a name buried deep in archived records and revive questions long considered dead. During spring 2019, within the modest confines of Community Read's Bookstore in Detroit, an unexpected discovery would unravel one of the city's most enduring unsolved cases. The establishment routinely accepted donated materials from estate liquidations, library dispersals, and public contributions. These deliveries frequently included pallets of unsorted publications and office materials arriving in large quantities. Lisa Harper, a university student fulfilling her internship requirements under investigative journalist Mark Davis, was tasked with organizing archival materials. Her daily routine involved examining obsolete record books, abandoned manuals, and deteriorating notebooks, monotonous work rarely producing significant findings. Her internship had commenced weeks earlier, supporting Davis's research for a podcast focusing on Detroit's unresolved criminal cases. Lisa's responsibilities were primarily clerical, making meaningful discoveries highly improbable. That particular day, Lisa processed business documentation apparently originating from dissolved municipal organizations. The majority consisted of 1980s financial records, salary reports, quarterly summaries, and routine meeting transcripts. However, inserted within pages of an unremarkable accounting ledger, Lisa discovered an isolated document. Its paper quality and aging matched surrounding materials, though the content was completely unrelated. The header identified it as internal correspondence from a May 1988 union gathering issued by Detroit's local transport workers. Chapter 1. What captured her attention wasn't the document format, but rather specific operational details contained within. It outlined a scheduled cash transport mission, including exact dates, departure locations, and sequential stops. Reading further, Lisa recognized the described route matched precisely the path followed by the security vehicle that had disappeared during June 1988's notorious theft. The discovery became more disturbing when she examined the document's bottom section. There, accompanying two additional names, appeared Edward Holt's handwritten signature. This name was familiar from Davis's research materials. Holt had undergone brief investigation regarding the 1988 crime. Police documentation indicated he wasn't scheduled for duty that day and possessed no legitimate reason for route knowledge. In fact, during the crime's time frame, Holt was listed as off-duty, with subsequent reports confirming his union resignation months before the incident. Nevertheless, the signature appeared intentional and assured. It was executed in permanent ink rather than pencil, and displayed no indication of forgery or reproduction. The document itself contained authentic creasing, age-related staining, and consistent deterioration, suggesting no tampering or recreation had occurred. Lisa initially questioned whether this represented clerical error or coincidental name similarity, but the memorandum's date preceded the theft by mere weeks, and correlation between route specifics and the stolen transport's itinerary eliminated doubt. The memorandum had no logical reason for inclusion in that ledger, just as the ledger had no reason to contain Union operational materials. No evidence suggested police had ever reviewed this document. It bore no official stamps, identification tags, or file numbers. It remained a loose page ignored for decades, buried within paperwork nobody had examined. She immediately brought the memorandum to Davis's attention. He studied it carefully, reading every line multiple times before examining the reverse side. While the back contained no identifying marks, the front content was extremely significant. This wasn't a duplicate copy or archived reproduction, but rather a contemporaneous record apparently originating from within the transport organization, listing confidential operational details while bearing a signature from someone officially uninvolved. The implications were obvious. If Holt possessed route information before the transport's departure, then either operational security had been compromised internally, or Holt had maintained communication channels with personnel having access to sensitive logistics information long after his official separation. Davis understood that document authenticity could resurrect questions. Law enforcement had abandoned 30 years earlier. During 1988, investigators had failed to identify security leaks or insider assistance. They couldn't confirm whether Holt had coordinated with active union members or maintained access to restricted materials through informal connections. However, this physical evidence proved beyond speculation that Holt possessed knowledge he shouldn't have had. The document's survival across decades resulted only from misplacement, bundling with unrelated materials, and burial within obsolete financial records. The implications for the original investigation were substantial. This new evidence provided justification for reviewing original suspect lists, examining meeting attendance records, and questioning whether official meeting minutes had been recorded. If not, the memorandum's existence raised additional suspicions. Questions regarding document preservation, its presence among donated materials, and absence from the original investigation remained unanswered. However, for the first time in over 30 years, the investigative trail wasn't completely cold. Lisa had discovered a document that shouldn't have existed, containing a signature that shouldn't have appeared, describing details never publicly released. The silence defining the case since 1988 had finally been shattered. Mark Davis initiated an investigation focusing on Edward Holt's life and documentation. The individual whose signature had appeared on an unauthorized document had died over 10 years previously, though his documentary trail remained accessible. Holt had terminated his transportation union employment during 1987, subsequently working at a local automotive repair facility while earning modest income and residing in a small East Side Detroit home. His financial history contained no warning signs, no luxury acquisitions, criminal charges, or property investments. He had died in 2007 from cardiac arrest, buried with minimal fanfare, and no significant estate. Davis's attention was drawn not to Holt himself, but to his offspring. During 1989, merely 1 year following the security transport theft, Edward's sole child, Daniel Holt, had enrolled at Harvard University. The enrollment documentation appeared normal, but the payment methodology was unusual. Tuition had been covered through a single substantial deposit made directly to the university's account, not by a parent, but through third-party intermediary services. The funding source was a private account associated with Charlene Green. Charlene Green had worked within the same union's financial department. Though not in senior management, she possessed access to payroll systems and reimbursement documentation. Union records indicated her resignation in March 1988, just 3 months before the transport disappeared. However, these records contained discrepancies. Her final salary payment was dated February, with no signed termination interviews or human resources correspondence, only a scanned resignation letter using generic formatting. Her tax filing ceased that year. She appeared once in 1988 police records, when her vehicle was reported near the area where the stolen transport was discovered. At that time, the sighting wasn't pursued. Davis investigated this connection further. Archived scheduling records from 1986 to 1987 showed both Holt and Green frequently appeared on identical weekly assignments. Internal logistics team meeting documentation listed both as participants in several overlapping sessions. These weren't random coincidences, but rather departmental assignments requiring communication. Holt was an experienced driver while Green processed transport-related reimbursement payments. Though no direct communication was documented, the pattern suggested professional familiarity. Davis's financial account review traced the third-party tuition payment to a Georgia routing number, leading to a closed account registered under Green's name at a post office box with no current forwarding information. The account had processed 2 major 1989 transactions, one payment to Harvard and one deposit 2 weeks earlier from a Texas-based limited liability logistics company. The Texas connection wasn't entirely new. The original police file briefly mentioned Leon Butler, whom a witness had described standing near the Detroit warehouse on the theft morning. Butler had been a long-distance trucker with no formal union connections, and the lead was abandoned after no local employment records were found. However, during subsequent years, he had quietly established a Texas transport company just months after the Detroit crime. The business operated without physical facilities, listed no full-time employees, and reported minimal taxable revenue. Yet for nearly 3 years, the company obtained small contracts through various shell vendor networks. Further investigation identified 2 vendors as briefly active subcontractors for armored cash transport companies operating in Missouri and Illinois. One had been dissolved, while the other had changed names 3 times before disappearing in 2002. Both had reported minor vehicle acquisitions potentially matching decommissioned security transports from the late 1980s. Davis discovered one had purchased a transport at auction from a Detroit area dealer during August 1988, less than 8 weeks following the crime. None of these connections had been established during the original investigation. Police had questioned Holt, found no cash, weapons, or matching getaway vehicles, and no witnesses willing to place him at the scene. He denied involvement and was released without charges. Green had never been formally questioned. Butler had never been located. The case was closed in 1989 with the $1.9 million written off as unrecoverable. A new scenario was emerging. Holt had operational access. Green possessed accounting authority. Butler had transport capabilities. Someone had ensured Daniel Holt's complete tuition payment just months after the cash disappeared. None were living extravagantly or had been arrested. However, the money had moved quietly and indirectly with sufficient planning to avoid detection for over 30 years. Davis recognized the next phase required more than speculation. He needed verification that routes Green and Holt had accessed were actually altered or manipulated during 1988. He needed to determine if Butler had ever returned to Michigan. Most importantly, he needed to identify who else might have known about the document surfacing in 2019. The signature was authentic, but someone else must have permitted that paper's existence initially. The crime was no longer just about missing currency, but about the infrastructure allowing its undetected disappearance and the conspiracy maintaining its concealment. Upon the unsigned meeting documents' emergence, Mark Davis understood the investigation could no longer remain limited to archives and speculation. He contacted Detroit Police Department and submitted all verified discoveries. With the recovered 1988 union document, Edward Holt's signature, and financial records indicating previously unexplored connections, authorities agreed the case merited reopening. The file received formal reclassification from cold case to active investigation. Initial steps involved confirming the payment trail. Harvard University records verified Daniel Holt's 1989 freshman tuition had been paid completely via single deposit. The amount, substantial even by Ivy League standards, traced back to an account held by Charlene Green, former accountant for the same transport union where Holt had worked. This wasn't coincidental. Investigators discovered that shortly before this payment, portions of Green's account funds had transferred to an Illinois brokerage firm through a shell company dissolving within months of formation. The monetary path had been deliberately routed to obscure origins, but financial forensics and updated federal databases made connections traceable. Charlene Green was located in a Columbus, Ohio suburb. She had left her union position months before the 1988 crime and subsequently moved into healthcare, working as private clinic administrative staff. Detectives' visit was unannounced. She initially expressed confusion, but after reviewing financial documentation, she admitted facilitating the tuition payment. Her explanation was straightforward. A longtime friend had requested assistance with his son's education. She claimed being told the funds represented family inheritance, requiring no questions. She repeated this phrase several times, though documents suggested otherwise. Investigators presented Green with a timeline placing her in Detroit during the robbery week. Her vehicle, a Chevrolet Caprice, had been identified in a 1988 police bulletin after a witness noted it near the abandoned warehouse where the transport was found. At that time, the detail was considered too vague for pursuit. Now it resurfaced with greater significance. Confronted with the timeline, Green's initial denials began cracking. 2 hours of questioning led to partial confession. She admitted receiving money from Edward Holt in cash. She admitted meeting him in Detroit before the robbery and again afterward. She insisted ignorance regarding the money's precise origin, but acknowledged being told not to inquire and accepting that condition. This gave investigators their first confirmed post-crime contact between suspected participants. Green wasn't arrested but was placed under active surveillance and designated as cooperating witness. Another name emerged from old employee rosters, James Carey, a union mechanic listed with the internal logistics team during the late 1980s. Carey had never undergone thorough questioning during the original investigation. He had departed Detroit in 1990, relocating south under unclear circumstances. No taxes had been filed under his name since 1992, with no recent employment or vehicle records. Louisiana inquiries, where he was last seen, produced no results. No missing person report had been filed, nor had Carey left digital footprints. Authorities entered his name into the National Criminal Database under warrant for questioning regarding historic financial crime involving organized conspiracy. His current location remained unknown, though his operational relevance was becoming increasingly apparent. Meanwhile, documentation connected to Leon Butler's defunct trucking business offered new direction. Though Butler had died in 2017, the company remained nominally active, likely through business registration auto-renewal processes. Archived property lease review led investigators to an eastern Michigan garage. Records indicated Butler had rented it under company name during mid-1988, 1 month before the crime. The facility had changed ownership multiple times since, but original lease agreements had been scanned into municipal archives during digitization projects. This garage matched dimensions and access configuration of the location where the stolen transport had been discovered, abandoned, stripped, and cleaned of prints. As additional pieces aligned, law enforcement collaborated with the district attorney's office to reconstruct criminal logistics. They now had connections between Holt, Green, Carey, and Butler, each playing distinct roles. Holt with route knowledge and operational access, Green with financial laundering, Carey likely involved in vehicle modification or disguise, and Butler providing transport and temporary concealment infrastructure. None had retained significant visible assets over time. However, the sudden payment for Daniel Holt's education, shell company activity, and Green's quiet Ohio lifestyle suggested careful money distribution, likely in cash, concealed across decades. The case was now framed not as standard robbery, but as coordinated insider operation involving at least 4 individuals, each utilizing their positions and union relationships to execute the crime without direct violence or exposure. The absence of 1988 surveillance footage had worked in their favor, but 3 decades later, documentary trails and forgotten transactions were proving their downfall. Remaining prosecutor questions weren't whether these individuals were involved, but how precisely they had coordinated execution without attracting attention, and who else, if anyone, had helped them disappear so cleanly afterward. Additional evidence was still required before filing charges, but the investigation had officially transformed from archival curiosity to criminal inquiry. The net was tightening. During reconstruction, investigators re-examined a 2019 discovery, a route log found inside an old accounting ledger at a closed union office warehouse. Among signatures was Edward Holt's name, a driver dismissed in 1987. Initially, this seemed like archival error or old copy, but based on date and content, the log clearly referenced August 2, 1988, the robbery day specifically. The log was a draft version printed in advance for internal route coordination. At that time, such documents didn't immediately enter official records, but circulated within transport departments and could be signed by people temporarily assisting with paperwork. During questioning, a former logistics coordinator admitted that, despite termination, Holt had occasionally appeared at the building and once helped organize paperwork before a major route restructuring. Though not officially employed, his signature could have appeared on documents not intended for archiving. This was precisely the type of paper mistakenly filed with draft route plans, unnoticed until ending up in a used bookstore where disbanded archive portions were sold during the 1990s. This moment became critical. The document proved Holt had access to transport routes on the actual robbery day, indicating not only involvement, but participation in planning long before operation commencement. Holt's signature became the first legally significant link connecting him to the specific route later hijacked. The perpetrators had planned every detail around a specific route moment, an officially scheduled stop on 7M Road for routine paperwork delivery to a union-affiliated warehouse. That brief window became the theft's fulcrum. At 9:47 a.m. on the theft day, the armored transport made its scheduled stop. As the transport stopped routinely, the guard exited to deliver documentation at a nearby checkpoint. Following procedure, security guard Marvin Daniels left the vehicle and entered the dispatch facility. During that brief window, a uniformed individual approached the open driver's door, pressing a sedative-soaked cloth over the driver's face, rendering him unconscious within seconds. The actual driver was quickly relocated to the transport's rear compartment, hidden from view. The impersonator, dressed identically and matching the driver's physical build, assumed position behind the wheel. When the guard returned moments later, he observed no reason for suspicion. Posture, uniform, and cap-obscuring facial features all appeared familiar. He re-entered the transport and settled into the passenger seat. Within seconds, the impersonator applied identical methodology, silently subduing the guard. Once unconscious, the guard wasn't immediately moved. Instead, the impersonator resumed the route, driving toward the planned unloading location, with the guard slumped beside him. Unnoticed by external observers, the transport continued its route and diverted toward Highland Park. Butler had arranged commercial garage usage leased weeks earlier through a shell company under false identity. The location had been cleared in advance and repurposed for rapid transfer operations. The vehicle entered the structure undetected. Inside, the crew worked efficiently. Currency crates were removed from the transport and repackaged into cushioned containers marked as metal scrap. Shipping documentation had been prepared in advance. Within hours, the money would leave the city aboard legitimate freight transport operated under Butler's Department of Transportation licensing. Back in the transport, the original crew was restrained with plastic ties. From external appearance, the transport appeared idle with no broken windows, forced doors, or engine damage. They drove the vehicle several blocks away and parked near another closed facility, leaving rear doors unlocked and keys in ignition. At 11:26 a.m., an anonymous caller contacted police reporting a suspicious truck. Officers arrived within minutes. The transport showed no damage signs. Cargo seals had been cut cleanly, not pried or slashed. Dashboard, locks, and ignition remained intact. Inside, both men were unconscious but breathing. Daniels was slumped in the front seat while Price lay stretched in the back. No physical injuries were documented, though both men reported sudden drowsiness before losing consciousness. They were transported to Detroit Receiving Hospital where blood work returned inconclusive results. No narcotics, alcohol, or clear sedatives were detected. Both men were disoriented and slow to respond but stabilized within hours. Transport contents had been cleared with precision. Missing shipment estimated value in bearer bonds and currency totaled $1.9 million. There had been no resistance, forced entry, or perpetrator traces. The transport itself had become a silence container with crew disabled, cargo removed, and trail erased. The crime had occurred during daylight without visible force, without alerting dispatch, and without surveillance mechanisms now considered standard. All official documentation showed the vehicle followed assigned schedules until brief interruption. Charlene Green, the former bookkeeping employee, re-entered the narrative through banking records. The tuition payment for Holt's son, made months later, provided the first formal trace Green had functioned as the laundering channel. She had no prior criminal history, but possessed administrative knowledge required for fund layering and transfer. Through transactions routed via Illinois-based fronts, stolen money portions were cleaned and distributed into legitimate accounts. This wasn't a crime born from desperation or violence, but a theft built on routine, trust, and institutional blind spots. Perpetrators used familiarity as camouflage and planning as weaponry. At every stage, they remained just within suspicion limits. For 31 years, silence held. Files were boxed and shelved. Witnesses retired. Leads faded. However, a single misplaced document's discovery reignited everything. That signature, Edward Holt's on a memorandum he was never supposed to see, connected the operation. The theft was no longer just an unsolved mystery, but a coordinated act with defined roles, strategic timing, and nearly surgical execution. During January 2020, following month-long confidential inquiry, charges were officially filed against Charlene Green for complicity in stolen fund laundering, assisting criminal proceeds concealment, and facilitating unauthorized financial transfers. Green, then, in her early 60s, wasn't a public figure, having maintained low profile working in private sector finance consulting until quiet 2015 retirement. Court documents revealed Green had maintained direct contact with Edward Holt during post-theft months. Her bank account showed numerous mid-sized deposits during that period, many subsequently distributed across third-party holding companies registered in Delaware, Nevada, and offshore jurisdictions. Investigators traced her activity through subpoenas and cross-border requests, confirming laundered money had originated from a Detroit-based armored transport firm, now defunct, known to have employed both Holt and the two involved crew members. Facing mounting forensic and documentary evidence, Green entered plea agreement, admitting to processing illicit transfers on Holt's behalf while claiming never to have questioned the money's source. Her cooperation contributed to laundering pathway reconstruction, though she claimed no knowledge of the actual robbery. The court imposed suspended sentence of 2.5 years and restitution fine of $220,000 payable over 5 years. Her conviction marked the case's first and only sentencing. Federal arrest warrant was issued for James Carey, charged with active robbery participation, including sedative agent use and impersonation to access the armored transport. Carey's whereabouts remained unknown. His last known address had been vacated in 1992, driver's license expired in 1995 without renewal, and all subsequent sightings were unconfirmed. Attempts to trace his movements through tax records, employment databases, or health systems yielded nothing. He was officially added to U.S. Marshals' wanted fugitive list with suspected aliases, including James Monroe and Kenneth Bell. A $50,000 federal reward was posted for information leading to his arrest. Edward Holt, identified as the plan's primary architect, had died in 2018 from natural causes in California. Though never prosecuted during his lifetime, multiple evidence pieces confirmed his central role. He had retained route information access through former colleagues and attended planning meetings shortly before the theft. Holt orchestrated timing, selected location, and used his company procedure familiarity to mask the operation as routine delay. Ronald Butler, the third confirmed participant, died in 2006 in Texas. He had operated the transport company used for stolen cargo relocation after the crime. Financial records showed direct links between his firm and temporary warehouse leases, plus short-haul shipments departing Highland Park Garage during the week following the robbery. Though he left no confession, his role was corroborated through bank transfers, shipping manifests, and witness statements from warehouse staff who identified him from old records. Investigators concluded the crime had been executed without weapons, digital compromise, or visible confrontation. Each participant operated strictly within their access zone. Holt manipulated scheduling and inserted false stops using former colleagues and unofficial drafts. Carey impersonated technician and performed chemical incapacitation inside the truck. Butler managed vehicle diversion, coordinated Highland Park Garage unloading process, and contracted disposal service removing disguised boxes under general freight licensing. Green's role occurred after physical asset movement, processing, fractioning, and quietly distributing funds in ways that eluded detection for decades. All key findings were documented in the task force's final report. Investigators reconstructed the crime using internal memoranda, vehicle logs, sealed personnel records, and the crucial discovery made by Lisa Harper, University of Michigan graduate student, who found folded route log misplaced inside archived ledger. Her accidental discovery led to case unsealing and became starting point for modern forensic analysis. After graduation, Harper joined nonprofit journalism outlet focused on unsolved crimes and later published long-form article becoming foundational account of the case's revival. Mark Davis produced and released 2022 documentary examining the entire case from planning through evasion using interviews, court transcripts, and reenactments based strictly on confirmed case files. The film aired on local stations. While the case gained public attention and partial closure, the most direct physical operation participant, James Carey, remained missing. The case wasn't declared fully closed, though prosecutors stated no further indictments were anticipated unless new evidence emerged. Ultimately, the story left behind no heroic chases or dramatic arrests. By late 2023, authorities had recovered and documented approximately 70% of stolen funds through account seizures and cooperative restitution from estate transfers. However, significant portions remained unaccounted for, possibly hidden in non-traceable assets, destroyed cash, or long-closed accounts. The case's conclusion demonstrated that even highly controlled operations could unravel from forgotten files. Truth suppressed for decades had survived inside misfiled documentation and surfaced not through confession or betrayal, but by accident. A missing log entry, a folded page, a dusty ledger retrieved from storage room shelf. And in that moment, history shifted.